Italy is a land of light, history and beauty, but underneath it holds something darker. Today we're diving into 20 of the strangest, most unsettling true stories hidden in its past. Some are legends, some are crimes, some are too well documented to ignore, and one of them takes us to a place few dare to mention. Beneath the surface of Palermo, in a forgotten monastery, there's a child who never truly left. She has a name, a face, and a story that has haunted generations. They call her Rosalia. She's not the beginning of this video, but once you've seen what comes before her, you may understand why we saved her for the end. Let's begin. In early Roman history, the founding of a city was more than a political act. It was a sacred ritual. According to ancient sources, this ritual sometimes involved human sacrifice. Among the most disturbing claims is that children were buried alive at the boundaries of new cities, including in the legendary core of Rome, known as Roma Quadrata. These acts were believed to anchor the city spiritually, binding it to protective forces from the underworld. While archaeological evidence is limited, fragments of Roman and Etruscan tradition hint at the practice of devotio, where human lives could be offered for the survival of the state. In early urban Rome, securing divine favor wasn't symbolic, it was literal. The walls were not just stone, they were sealed with blood. In 186 BCE, Roman authorities uncovered what they considered a threat to the moral fabric of the Republic: the Bacchanalia. These secret rites, dedicated to Bacchus, the god of wine and frenzy, had spread across Italy. Initially harmless, the cult evolved into a clandestine network of orgiastic festivals, initiation rituals, and, according to the Senate, criminal conspiracies including murder. The Roman state reacted with severity. Thousands were arrested or executed. The Senate issued the Senatus Consultum de Bacchanalibus, a decree banning the cult. It wasn't just a crackdown on religion, it was a political message. The Republic would not tolerate parallel powers. For Rome, ecstasy had become sedition. In Sicily, you'll see them on balconies, in gardens, and in shops, striking ceramic vases shaped like human heads, one dark-skinned, one pale. These are the teste di Moro, or Moorish heads. They come from a legend born in Palermo during the Arab rule of the island. The story goes, a young Sicilian woman falls for a Moorish merchant, but when she discovers he has a family waiting in the east, she takes revenge, cutting off his head and turning it into a pot for her basil plant. The plant thrives, and neighbors begin asking for similar vases. Another version tells of a noblewoman and her lover, both murdered by her family, their heads hung in mourning. Today the Teste di Moro are more than souvenirs. They're symbols of Sicily's mixed heritage: Arab, Norman, Mediterranean. Handmade in cities like Caltagirone, each piece is a blend of legend, artistry, and memory. They embody the island's history, where beauty and brutality, myth and craftsmanship live side by side. At the edge of ancient Rome stands a monument that feels entirely out of place: a pyramid. Built between 18 and 12 BCE, it was the tomb of Gaius Cestius, a Roman magistrate fascinated by Egyptian culture. Following Rome's conquest of Egypt, Egyptian styles became fashionable among the elite. Cestius ordered a pyramid in the Nubian style, steep, narrow, and clad in white marble from Luna. Inside, a modest burial chamber was decorated with now faded frescoes. Later the structure was absorbed into the Aurelian walls, preserving it for centuries. In the Middle Ages, locals believed it was the tomb of Remus, twin brother of Romulus, but in truth it's a rare Roman experiment with foreign grandeur. A man's desire to be remembered not as Roman but eternal. In the early 11th century, Pisa was under threat from Saracen invaders. One night, as enemy forces approached the southern quarter of the city, a young noblewoman named Kinzica de Sismondi raised the alarm. Most of the men were away. She acted alone. By alerting the city's leaders, she gave Pisa the time it needed to organize a defense. The attackers were pushed back, but Kinzica didn't survive. According to tradition, she died saving her family. Over time, the story became part of local identity, even linked to the origins of cecina, a dish made from chickpea flour, said to have been thrown at the invaders. Today, some historians believe the tale may blend truth and legend, as similar Saracen raids did occur in the early 1000s. Whether Kinzica was one woman or many, her name lives on, carved into the memory of a city that needed a symbol of courage. In Renaissance Rome, Beatrice Cenci lived under the rule of a father whose cruelty shaped every part of her life. After repeated pleas for help were ignored, she took part in a plan to end the abuse. In 1598, Francesco Cenci was found dead. Beatrice and her family were arrested. The trial drew enormous public attention. She was interrogated under pressure, and despite a skilled defense, the outcome was set. Beatrice was executed in 1599 before a silent, stunned crowd. But the people saw something the court did not. They saw a young woman pushed past the limits of endurance. Over the centuries, Beatrice became more than a name, a symbol of quiet rebellion against a world where power went unchecked behind palace doors. Her story still echoes through Rome's streets, not as a scandal, but as a warning. In 1289, Ugolino della Gherardesca was imprisoned in a fortified tower in northern Italy. With him were 2 sons and 2 grandsons. Accused of treason in a political feud, he was not sentenced to execution. Instead, the door was sealed. No food, no escape. Days passed, then weeks. One by one the children died. Ugolino was the last to go. Dante would later place him in the Inferno, eternally biting the head of his rival, and alluding to an even darker rumor, that Ugolino, in his final days, may have fed on the bodies of his kin. The historical record offers no proof, but the suggestion existed even then. The Hunger Tower still stands in Pizzighettone, cold and lifeless. A stone reminder that in medieval Italy, punishment could be as cruel as imagination allowed. On March 16, 1978, Aldo Moro, former Prime Minister and leader of Italy's Christian Democrats, was taken by the Red Brigades, a far-left militant group. His escort team was targeted during the operation. For 55 days, Moro remained in captivity. The group demanded a prisoner exchange, but the government held firm. On May 9th, Moro's body was found inside a parked car in central Rome, placed between the headquarters of Italy's 2 major parties. The message was unmistakable. His death marked a turning point during Italy's turbulent years of lead. It exposed not only the extremes of political violence, but also the profound divisions tearing through the country's institutions. Between the 1960s and 1980s, Italy faced a long wave of attacks and political unrest. Though many acts were blamed on extremist groups, investigators began to suspect a broader pattern, a so-called strategy of tension. The theory suggested that certain factions within the state may have used or allowed such violence to spread fear. This climate of instability would then serve to justify tougher security measures and limit the rise of left-wing political movements. While full accountability has remained elusive, multiple cases point to deliberate obfuscation and withheld evidence. During these decades, Italy was not only confronting radicals, it was navigating a political game with hidden players. In the 1970s and early 1980s, a secret network quietly extended its reach through Italy's highest institutions. Known as Propaganda Due, or P2, this lodge operated outside traditional Masonic frameworks. Under the leadership of Licio Gelli, it counted among its members key figures in government, the military, business, and the media. When uncovered in 1981, P2 was linked to financial scandals, press interference, and covert plans to reshape Italian politics. Its influence was not speculative. Documents and membership lists confirmed its reach. For many Italians, the exposure of P2 confirmed a long-held fear that their democracy was being manipulated from within. Quick pause. If you've made it this far, chances are you're enjoying this deep dive into Italy's hidden side. But here's the thing. Over 90% of the people watching this channel aren't subscribed. If you want more stories like this, the kind you won't find on travel shows or history textbooks, hit that button. Because here we go deeper and darker. Back to the video. On May 1, 1947, a public gathering was held in the hills of Portella della Ginestra, Sicily. The event was meant to celebrate Labor Day and recent electoral gains by progressive parties, but the gathering was interrupted by a violent incident that left multiple people dead and many more injured. The attack was attributed to an outlaw group with suspected ties to local criminal networks. However, questions soon arose about possible political motives. In the tense post-war atmosphere, the growing influence of workers' movements had alarmed powerful landowners and conservative interests. The full truth remains uncertain, but for many, Portella marked the moment when political fear began to shape public life in post-war Italy. Between 1968 and 1985, a series of double homicides shocked the region around Florence. The victims were usually couples found in remote areas, often in parked cars at night. In total, 16 people lost their lives. Authorities linked the crimes through a specific weapon, a .22 caliber Beretta loaded with ammunition marked by a distinctive H, Some details suggested a ritualistic element, leading investigators to believe the killer, or killers, acted with intent beyond violence. Over the years, multiple suspects were arrested, most notably Pietro Pacciani, a farmer with a criminal past. He was convicted, then acquitted, and died before a final trial could be held. Despite decades of investigation, the true identity of the perpetrator remains uncertain. The case has gripped Italian media for generations. In 2024, new DNA analysis was requested by the family of one victim, hoping modern forensics might finally bring answers to a mystery that refuses to fade. In 1983, Emanuela Orlandi, a 15-year-old Vatican citizen, disappeared while walking home from a music lesson in Rome. Her case quickly drew national attention, not just for the mystery, but for the powerful forces it seemed to touch. Over time, theories emerged suggesting involvement from organized crime, secret societies, and even high-ranking church officials. Anonymous calls and conflicting evidence complicated the investigation, while repeated leads turned up nothing definitive. Theories have linked her case to international events, pressure campaigns on the Vatican, and efforts to conceal deeper networks. Despite renewed efforts and official inquiries, including recent searches in Vatican-owned properties, the truth remains elusive. Emanuela's disappearance is no longer just a cold case, it's a symbol of unanswered questions at the heart of modern Italy. In June 1982, Roberto Calvi, one of Italy's most powerful bankers, was found dead beneath Blackfriars Bridge in London. Officially, his death was first labeled a suicide, but the more investigators looked, the stranger it became. Calvi had been the head of Banco Ambrosiano, a bank deeply entangled in secret deals involving the Vatican, the clandestine P2 Lodge, and suspected organized crime. In the months before his death, the bank collapsed under the weight of a massive financial scandal. Calvi had fled Italy, fearing for his life. When his body was discovered, it raised immediate questions. Was this a warning? A silencing? Decades later, his case still stands as a reminder of how financial power, secrecy, and political influence collided in 1980s Italy, and how those who stood at the center often didn't survive. Standing quietly on Venice's Grand Canal, Caudario looks like any other Renaissance palace, elegant, historic, serene. But behind its ornate facade lies a legacy of misfortune. Built in 1479 for the diplomat Giovanni Dario, the building soon earned a reputation as cursed. Dario's daughter Marietta reportedly died young, and her husband suffered a violent end. Over the centuries, a pattern seemed to emerge. Owners and tenants of Caudario faced financial ruin, scandal, or early death. British historian Rawdon Brown took his own life after living there. Later, Count Del Lanz was killed by his partner. In the 1980s, businessman Fabrizio Ferrari declared bankruptcy after acquiring the property, and his sister died soon after in an accident. The last high-profile resident, Raul Gardini, died in 1993 under suspicious circumstances. While historians have debunked some of the darker claims, the palace's reputation endures. Even in recent years, some visitors report strange occurrences, and some owners refuse to sleep there at all. Caudario remains a Venetian mystery, a place where history and legend continue to intertwine. On March 23, 1944, Italian partisans attacked a German patrol in Rome, killing 33 soldiers. The following day, in retaliation, Nazi authorities rounded up 335 civilian prisoners, far exceeding the original death toll, and executed them inside a series of caves along the Via Ardeatina. Most of the victims had no connection to the attack. They were selected from political detainees, intellectuals, and random arrests. The massacre was carried out in secrecy, and the caves were later sealed with explosives in an attempt to hide the evidence. For years, the event was spoken of only in hushed tones. It wasn't until after the war that the full extent of the atrocity came to light. Today, the Ardeatine caves serve as a solemn memorial, with each victim buried on site. The massacre is now seen as one of the gravest war crimes committed on Italian soil, a stark reminder of how quickly retaliation can become indiscriminate violence. In 2020, a quiet scandal broke in Rome, not about politics or organized crime, but about graves, specifically, the graves of fetuses buried without their mother's knowledge. In the Flaminio Cemetery, dozens of women who had undergone abortions, legal and often for medical reasons, discovered something disturbing. Their names had been engraved without their consent on white wooden crosses marking the burial sites of fetal remains. Most had never been told where the remains would go. None had given permission for their names to be used, and yet there they were, turned into public symbols, without warning, without choice. The graves were placed in a section known as the Cemetery of the Angels, managed in part by Catholic associations. What was meant as a gesture of religious compassion became a moment of public outrage. For the women involved, it wasn't just a breach of privacy, it was a hijacking of grief, a deeply personal experience turned into a statement they hadn't agreed to. Even in modern Rome, where church and state are separate on paper, some lines remain blurred, and in this case they were carved in wood. In the heart of Bologna, inside the Basilica of San Petronio, an old fresco has become a source of modern controversy. Painted in the 15th century by Giovanni da Modena, the artwork illustrates scenes from Dante's Inferno, including a depiction of the Prophet Muhammad in a state of suffering based on medieval Christian interpretations. At the time, the imagery reflected dominant views in Europe, which often cast Islam as a heretical movement. For centuries, the fresco drew little public reaction, but in the 21st century, it has become a flashpoint. Islamist groups have condemned the image as deeply offensive. Security threats followed, including at least 2 foiled plots to bomb the church. Since 2015, the basilica has been under constant protection. Today, the debate continues. Should the artwork be preserved as a historical artifact, or covered to avoid provocation? Local authorities and church officials insist on its cultural value, emphasizing the importance of context. But the fresco remains more than an image, it is a mirror of how history, faith, and fear still collide. San Gennaro, Bishop of Benevento, was martyred in 305. According to legend, a devout woman named Eusebia collected his blood into 2 glass vials at the moment of his execution. These vials are now preserved in the Cathedral of Naples, where they play a central role in one of Italy's most enduring religious rituals. 3 times a year, the Archbishop of Naples presents the sealed ampoules before a crowd. In most cases, the coagulated blood liquefies, a moment welcomed with cheers, prayers, and deep relief. But when it does not, concern spreads quickly. The blood failed to liquefy in 1980, just before a devastating earthquake struck southern Italy. It also failed in 1939, just before World War II, and again in 1943 during the Nazi occupation. Each time, catastrophe followed. The Church has never confirmed the miracle, but the event remains a pillar of local faith. To many, it's more than tradition, it's a warning. In Naples, the fate of an entire city is believed to pulse inside a centuries-old vial. In ancient Rome, dogs weren't just guardians or hunters, they were companions, loved, named, mourned, and in some cases, buried with honor. Across the Roman world, archaeologists have found tombs dedicated to dogs, some with epitaphs as moving as any written for a human. One reads, "I am the dog, Margarita. I lived 14 years, I kept the house safe. I never barked without reason." Another, found near Rome, says, "Isa is more playful than a ball. She is purer than a kiss. She loved her master, and he loved her." That one was written by the poet Martial, and Isa was his lapdog. Some tombs were carved in marble, others in modest stone. Some featured sculptures of the animal in repose, collars still visible. Owners often had them buried in gardens, near family plots, or even in formal necropolises. For Romans, the bond between human and dog was not just sentimental, it was worthy of ritual. These epitaphs offer something rare in ancient history, not the story of conquest or law or empire, but love, quiet, domestic, and eternal. Hidden deep beneath the Vatican lies a chapter of religious history rarely discussed. The secret prison of the Holy Office known as the Sant'Uffizio. Used for centuries during the time of the Inquisition, this underground complex was designed not for punishment, but for control. Accused heretics, thinkers, and suspected sorcerers were brought here to face trials held behind closed doors. These weren't open courts. Testimonies were scarce. The accused often never met their accusers. Within the stone walls, interrogations took place under intense psychological pressure, and in some cases, physical coercion. The goal was confession, not debate. The Vatican rarely speaks of these chambers today. Much of the complex is sealed off, unvisited by tourists, unmentioned in most guides, yet the structure remains, a shadow beneath the world's most powerful church. While the Vatican above is a symbol of continuity and spiritual leadership, the cells below are a reminder of a time when religious orthodoxy was enforced through silence and fear. Palermo's Capuchin catacombs are unlike any burial site in the world. Beneath the monastery lie thousands of preserved bodies, monks, nobles, children, displayed upright in hallways. But one figure draws more attention than all the others: Rosalia Lombardo. She died in 1920 at just 2 years old. Her father, overcome with grief, asked for her body to be preserved. The embalmer, Alfredo Salafia, used a chemical formula so advanced that Rosalia's face still appears untouched by time, eyelashes intact, skin translucent. She became known as the Sleeping Beauty. In the early 2000s, a wave of media attention sparked rumors that Rosalia had opened her eyes on camera. Some saw it as a miracle. Others believed it was a trick of the light. But her presence is only part of a larger tradition. The Capuchins preserved not just bodies but identities, dressed in robes placed in family niches exposed to visitors. And Rosalia bears the same name as Palermo's patron saint, Santa Rosalia, credited with saving the city from plague in 1624. Two Rosalias, one who brought deliverance to the living, one who became a symbol of death's serenity. Together they frame a city's most intimate ritual with the beyond. Ancient Rome shaped the world we live in. Its laws, its language, its cities, all of it still echoes through our systems, our words, our architecture. Italy, more than any other place, carries the weight of that legacy, a birthplace of empires, of revolutions, of ideas that still define the West. But like every country, it has its shadows. And in Italy, those shadows aren't hidden. They're carved into stone, buried under churches, whispered through rituals that have survived the centuries. That's what makes it fascinating, the contrast, the beauty of the visible, and the stories buried just beneath. Thanks for watching Dark Chronicles. See you in the next one.